All right, we're back. The fourth stop of the 2026 WSL Championship Tour season. The Corona Cero New Zealand Pro presented by Bonsoy is done and dusted, won by Carissa Moore and Italo Ferreira at Raglan. So congrats to both of them. This is the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan. I'm back here with Mitch Salazar. Mitch, so good to have you back. I think being a fellow goofy footer, both of us were circling Raglan with great interest back when it was announced. And now that it's done, I think we've got a lot to talk about. But first things first, Mitch, how are you doing today?
Yeah, well, good morning, Dave. Beautiful Monday morning here in Southern California. Happy Memorial Day, by the way. Was able to get some waves this morning. Hope you did too. Pretty fun out there. Southwell showing up right now. But all in all, we talk about Raglan and the importance of this event on tour. Everybody was saying it, especially the goofy footers. It is so nice to have a performance left on tour. Italo looked great. Carissa obviously on the backhand too. Shout out to Sori Limblad, man. Multiple finals now in her career. She was that close to winning and defeating maybe the all-time great on the women's side in Carissa Moore, but Carissa just a little too dangerous on the backhand. I also want to give props to Yago Dora with that perfect 10 minutes remaining in the heat against Cole Hauschman, and he pulls a rabbit out of the hat too. But I think all in all, some great days, some really difficult days to compete at. I thought the fans showed up. I thought that was probably one of the most important parts of this event too, and I think that them having an event here really showcased what they want as fans and the support that they have for surfing overall. But, first presentation overall for Raglan, Manu Bay, really stoked on it, Dave, and stoked on the outcome of the event too on finals day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to get into winners and losers here in a minute, but before we do, perhaps someone who could arguably sit in both categories from New Zealand is WSL water photographer Ed Sloan, incredible artist, really nice guy,
Yeah.
and someone I've had the pleasure of working with for years at this point. He was attacked by something during the second semifinal of the men's event yesterday. There is footage online of the attack if you want to go hunting for it. But, a few things. I don't think that as of recording, anyone's confirmed what the animal was. The on-site medical staff, they indicated it could have been a seal or a sea lion, but weren't 100% about that. Obviously, we all know that the ocean's home to all manner of life, and it's something we live with every time we either paddle out or swim out. I exchanged some messages with Ed last night, and he's in good spirits, if not still a bit shocked. I do want to give a huge credit to the Water Patrol, who got Ed really within seconds of the attack. They train for this kind of thing, but we're all grateful that they're able to execute when needed. And as I said, Ed's a great guy, and his photography, both on and off tour, is really special. And so I think listeners, if you haven't already, you should check him out. He's at Ed Sloan Photo with an E on Sloan there on Instagram. And he's even posted some photos of his foot from the hospital if you're curious. But yeah, I want to give Ed a shout out. Kind of crazy thing that happens, but it's crazy sport. And yeah, I hope he has a speedy recovery. But yeah, with that, Mitch, winners and losers, who have you got for your first loser coming out of New Zealand?
Yeah, I don't want to be too harsh, but not a single European woman made it into the quarters or better here at Raglan, and it was disappointing, obviously. We've all touted Tia Zabrowski to potentially be Rookie of the Year this year in 2026. She hasn't really fulfilled that yet. I know it's only 4 events in, but you don't want to have a lot of throwaway results heading into the back end of the season with a lot more pressure on your shoulders. Nadia Idostarbe, after the incredible performance that she had over there on the Gold Coast, was expecting a bit more from her here. Kika Veselka, the same thing, former World Junior Champion. I really like her at this wave at Manu Bay, just a bit wave-starved. And, for a lot of surfers, it's their first time going to this location, obviously, to compete, first of all. But most of them hadn't free surfed at this spot up until days leading up to it. So the good thing about the Goldie finishing early, a good amount of them did leave early for Raglan to go train over there. But for the likes of Kika, I know her family was over there on the Gold Coast. She wasn't able to make the quick transition over here to Manu Bay. And same could be said for Yolanda Hopkins after a pretty solid performance, I felt, on the Gold Coast, where she just narrowly lost to Molly Picklum. I felt like this was kind of her chance to go into Central America and then eventually Brazil with a bit of momentum. And unfortunately, it didn't happen for her either. So the European woman, they're my first loser in this event. Hopefully they can get things going. And in Natle Leo, I think she has a lot more to give too, because coming out of that same region too and qualifying for the championship tour for her very first time, they need to make up a lot of ground, Dave.
Yeah, it's a good one. And they all started relatively strong. I think, we've got an extended women's field with 24 women on tour this year. We got a new format that is elimination head-to-head from the jump. And interesting start to the year. I just think it's tough. You mentioned Tia Zabrowski. I think both of you and I were pretty big on her heading into the season. It's not that she's not surfing well, but it's really cutthroat, and you can see that on both the men's and women's side.
Totally.
You touched on it a little bit, and I think this is going to be a theme throughout some of our analysis, but losers are kind of tough in an event like this just because the conditions really up until the end didn't reveal a ton. But if you are just looking at who fell the furthest, on the men's side, you have the biggest drops being 4 spots on the rankings. Jake Marshall down to 19th, Callie Voss down to 22nd, Baron Mamiya to 23rd, Joel Vaughn to 24th, and Mateus Hurdy all to 25th. All of them dropped 4 spots. And then on the women's side, we had 2 people drop 4 spots in Isabella Nichols and Nadia Arastarbe down to 12th and 13th, respectively. Again, not a whole lot you can learn from some of these rounds, but everyone's got to compete in the same conditions. And if you're on the CT, when you have an event like this, especially in those early rounds, you'd really want to mitigate the fall as best as possible.
That's such a great point. I mean, you already have to minimize errors the way it is. And now with the new format in place, there is no room for what kind of error. And I think we saw that in the heat with Griffin and Crosby. I feel like at the beginning of the heat, too much hassling, a little bit of tussling up at the point when there's smaller waves on the inside. I know they're not super quality waves, but they're scores. And that's where I felt that Griffin broke away after Crosby gave him priority, was able to get his 2 scores, and that transitions into my second loser. Unfortunately for us at this event, it was the South Pacific Ocean. It was pumping right before the event. And, of course, the last 2 days of the event were pretty darn good and stoked on it. The outcome was there. Yago's perfect 10, Italo and Carissa winning. The last 2 days were epic, but you have to run the event before that too. And as you said, everybody's got to surf in the same kind of stuff. So you go out there, you put your game face on regardless of how it is. And even if Mother Nature isn't providing kinds of things, you still got to make do with what's available, Dave.
Yeah, it's tough. And it is bummer because, as I said, for some of these heats, I don't feel like there's a whole lot you can learn from the actual competition. It's the ocean, though, so that's something we deal with. It does kind of relate to my second loser as well, and that's, running CT events with no backup venues, which is on us, of course, but and I will say that I'm bringing this up, but even with the forecast we had in New Zealand over the last couple of weeks, it was just tough, and I'm not sure it would have helped. But generally speaking, if you have a backup venue, I guess in this case it could be like a beach break like Ruapuke, which I think we saw a lot of the CT surfers competing against, not competing at, but training at in the lay days. If you have that in future, what it does is it could take pressure off of running the event. And you can just kind of focus on raglan when the swell's there. Hopefully we get a window in the future where it's just like good swell the whole time. Because as you said, those final days, it's like, this is a great surfing, and even before the event, like I saw a couple of critiques like, Manu Bay is not a performance left-hander. It's not a performance part of the point, but it's like, this is great surfing from the CT surfers, and it's really cool to see them take a look at it when the swell turns up. But yeah, I think in the future, if we can have a backup venue, it certainly takes a lot of pressure off of the tours department in running the event. Of course, this kind of has to be balanced with event partnership and, the ability for people both on-site and online to actually watch the surfing, and both things being really essential to running events, which are not cheap. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future, but it is something we're going to talk about for sure. And I just think, as you said before, that the fans in New Zealand are awesome. The surfing community there is amazing. There's so many good waves. There's so many good surfers. And I really hope we get to come back, and I hope I hope the local community invites the lineup back. I'd like to go check the event out when it's on.
And to your point about that backup venue too, I mean, we've had it at multiple locations on the Gold Coast when was still over there available. I think the Coldwater Classic was a perfect example too. I remember Miguel Pupo dominating at the lane, and then he eventually finished the event at Waddell Creek and went over there. Yep. And yeah, certain spots it's easier and it's more accessible, but you also need to have the funds available in order to provide that too, because you're not just moving the tower over. You got to put the Red Bull Athlete Zone, everything else over there too. So it's a lot of infrastructure that you're actually moving.
Yeah, for sure.
My third loser How often do we talk about that? We've been talking about this for years, dude, on this podcast right here. It's the doubters of the alternative crafts right here at the championship tour level. 2+1, baby. That's what's up. Shout out to our boy, our colleague, Richie Lovett, giving Felipe Toledo an extra pair of 2+1 fins, too. His personal stash, by the way. Richie, who also works for FCS. It was so rad, man. Felipe making it all the way into the quarters with that board. And even Vaughn asked him, are you going to keep riding that even if it gets a little bit bigger? Hell yeah, I'm going to keep riding it. It's working, right? And I thought even in the quarterfinal that he lost, he looked amazing. And, just narrowly got defeated right there. But if you look at Toledo's average heat score so far in 2026, 15.71. That leads the men's championship tour sides of things so far. And to me, he looks excellent. I thought he brought a different perspective to competitive surfing so far in 2026. And I hope we get to see that more down the line too, Dave, because I thought it was very sensational.
It's a great loser, and I'm going to keep my gunpowder dry on this topic for when we get to our winners, so more to come. But yeah, the third loser for me coming out of New Zealand, and this is a bit harsh because as we've been talking about, the conditions they had to perform in, it's tough. And for these surfers in particular, such an uphill battle on the seeding side. But it was the New Zealand wild cards. You had Tom Butlin, Billy Stearman, and Alani Morris. They all went down in the opening round to Luke Thompson, Morgan Sibilic, and Betty Lucicura Johnson, respectively. All three of them world-class surfers. And as I said, New Zealand surfing, it produces amazing surfers. There's Ian Ratso Buchanan, Daniel Cariopa, Paige Harab, Ella Williams, the Quinn brothers, Maz and Jay, Rick Christie, and on and on and on. It's such a great country. It's such a great surfing country. I'd love to see more of them on the CT, and hopefully this CT event, and hopefully events in the future, and even kind of QS events and Pro Juniors will kind of help harness the natural talent that's already there. Because as I said, I'm always impressed every time I see a surfer from New Zealand pop up on our radar, and I'd just like to see more of them.
Yeah, and I think Bill did an amazing job in the booth too when he was invited every time.
Yeah.
Hospitality is a major thing for us, of course, and the fact that we get treated this way every location that we go to. But I thought Bill did every asset of his job to perfection at this event, whether it was in the booth, whether it was coaching Molly Picklam, and he put up a hell of a show against Morgan Sibilic too, who made the final, by the way. So he earned his stripes, I felt. He's been on the Challengers for a number of years. Multiple-time Olympian Bill Stearman, and to me, when it's all said and done, I think he's definitely going to go down in the Hall of Fame and has to be, in my opinion, one of the best New Zealand surfers of all time. So props to Bill, the rest of the crew. I thought they did amazing. And speaking of people who did amazing, my first winner, shout out to the Goofy Footers, man, especially on the men's side. Italo Ferreira, men's champion, his first event win of the season, dropping 9s and 8s like if it were nothing. Iago gets the perfect 10 in the dying minutes of his quarterfinal against another fellow Goofy Footer who finally made a heat this season, by the way, in Cole Hausman. How she lost with 17 points, bro. So just let that settle in a little bit. Like, he wasn't no pushover. He was winning the majority of the heat right there. And, of course, Miguel Pupo, same thing. Guy's a top 10 surfer at the moment, a contender, already has a victory. I love what I'm seeing from these gentlemen, and I feel like it's going to be a great season for these Goofy Footers that I just named, especially heading into a wave that most of them already have experience at Punta Roca as well.
It's a great call. I mean, Cole Hausman losing with 17 odd points. We call that the Sean Cansdell zone. Also a fellow Goofy Footer where it's like, I've got excellent scores. How am I losing early on in these events? But it's a great one. And I think one of the things that we've talked about over the years is like, can we get a high performance left-hander on tour? And I think, conditions being what they were, specifically at the end of the event, like Raglan really delivered that. And I think it was cool to see that balance, and even cool to see natural footers just showcase their backhand in a different way, which I thought was great. You mentioned Morgan Sibilic, obviously Carissa Moore, like it was really, really cool. First new winner coming out of New Zealand for me are the Brazilian men. Italo takes the win, vaults to number 1 on the rankings. He is now on the rankings, followed by Miguel Pupo, who won bells, 3-time world champion Gabriel Medina in 3rd, and reigning men's world champion Iago Dora in 4th, all Goofy Footers, to your point. But 4 events in, and the Brazilian males occupy 100% of the top 4 spots on the CT rankings. Never happened before for Brazil. And on top of that, they also have Sammy Pupo in 7th and 2-time world champion Felipe Toledo in 10th. So 60% of the current top 10 on the men's tour. That's heavy. But huge congrats to Brazil so far this season. I mean, we've been talking about the narrative of the Brazilian Storm for years now, basically for over a decade, well over a decade since Gabriel's first world title in 2014. And I mean, we might be seeing the most concentrated version of that Storm in 2026.
I mean, top 4 is one thing, but 60% of the top 10 is saying that you're dominant. And there was a point in time, I think it was 2018, where 2/3 out of the men's championship tour were Brazilian surfers. And I think William Cardoso was one of those people that had success that year, winning the event in Uluwatu.
Sure.
Our colleague Jesse Mendes was on tour back then, too. He won the Triple Crown. And guess what? All these 4 surfers that are in the top 4 right now were members of the championship tour back then, and they were doing just as well. In fact, Gabe won his 2nd world title that year, too. So fast forward 8 years down the line, they're still doing their thing. Iago now a world champion, Italo world champion, too, and the only one missing out of those top 4 men is Miguel Pupo, and this could be his year if he continues the success that he's already had in the first 4 events. And speaking of another goofy footer, my second winner, got to give props to Alyssa Spencer, dude. 2 semifinals in the first 4 events already. What a total 180 to what she had on her rookie year on the championship tour to right now. And requalifying through the Challenger Series, it was not easy. She was in the top 10 for the majority of the time in qualification. But you look at her result over there in Newcastle, incredible stuff. And now she already has 2 semifinals. One over there at Bells and one right here at Raglan. So Goofy v. Regular. I don't think it's really a matter for her. I don't think the backhand or the forehand has really had an impact to her either. And I even say on the Gold Coast, the heat that she lost, she just barely lost out, presenting really good surfing too. So to me, Alyssa Spencer, very much improved. I feel like that area of San Diego has given a lot lately to professional surfing, especially from the United States. And I think she's going to have a top 5 finish in her very near future, Dave.
It's a great one. And this is it's a goofy heavy podcast. We're gonna take it while we can. But yeah, the second winner for me coming out of Raglan is the event runner up, another goofy footer, Sawyer Lindblad, and I have to apologize to her as well. Sawyer, I was unfamiliar with your game until this year, really. Of course, I've been aware of her ability, but women's surfing right now has such a deep talent pool that it's hard to stand out. But in 2026, Sawyer, she's shaken off a slow start at Bells. She's posted back-to-back semifinal finishes at Margaret River and Snapper Rocks, and then a final against Carissa in New Zealand. And for me, it's not just the results that's been impressive. It's her surfing. She's consistently posting excellent scores and seems to be doing it kind of agnostic of conditions. Sometimes you'll see surfers come through the tour where it's like, yeah, that's an A+ surfer in these particular conditions, but the rest of the time, they're kind of in the mix. But like, I'm not seeing really any faults in her surfing right now. And big winner. I think she should be on everyone's radar moving forward.
And I think for a lot of people that play fantasy too, she should easily be on their team too, especially given the fact that she's already finaled over there in Brazil. And I feel like she has a lot more to give at home at lowers too. So watch out for her in the back end of the year. She only has one throwaway, as you said. Close heat that she lost to Carissa over there at Bells. Everything else is a keeper. 2 semis in the final. I like what I'm seeing from Lindblad so far. And of course, growing up at those beautiful waves in San Clemente, especially at lowers, that she has that refined point break style, but she competed in the majority of the beach breaks that we have here in Southern California, so she is well versed. So watch out for Sawyer in the back end of 2026. My winner, it's really a beautiful story, Dave, but it has to be Carissa Moore, my final winner. She gets her first win this season, but how epic was the way that she got carried up by her father and her husband while she's carrying her daughter up the track right there. I mean, that to me is something that is going to be etched into history and not only professional surfing, I think into professional sports worldwide. And if there's anybody that can prove doubters wrong, come back after motherhood, pretty much 2 years off, and you come back and put on a performance like this. She looked hungry too, and that was the scariest part about it. Leading up to the final, that one heat where she threw away multiple 9s, multiple excellent scores, like there's not many people that are able to drop a 9 in their whole career on the championship tour. And the fact that she was able to do it in a single heat, I think means a lot to her. I think it proves that her surfing is still there, but more than anything, her competitive spirit. ascending the rankings right now, Dave. She's looking great heading into El Salvador. I really like her chances to get another world title. Sitting at number 6, just behind Sawyer, already with the W. Does have 2 throwaways, though, but I like the momentum she's built off of Raglan right here.
It's a great one, and the commentators are kind of calling it out all event that New Zealand for the TSB Bank Women's Surf Festival back in 2010 was Carissa's first CT win as a CT surfer. I think let's not sleep on the fact that she won the 2009 Gidget Pro as a wild card, but special place for Carissa. And I mean, such an awesome moment. You mentioned it, seeing Carissa chaired up the beach with her daughter Elena. Total legend. I really loved it, and a worthy final winner, Mitch, and someone in Carissa who seems about as selfless as they come in terms of professional surfing. My final winner, I'm going to go the other direction and be very selfish. And my final winner coming out of New Zealand is the Lineup Podcast for being totally vindicated for our long-held and enthusiastically bellowed belief that CT surfers should experiment with performance alternative shapes, especially at Raglan.
Yes!
And what did we see? We saw 2-time, as you mentioned, world champion Felipe Toledo on the Sharp Eye modern 2+1 model, blazing across the walls at Raglan. So I really was thinking that, and I was texting Matt Biolis, I'm like, please tell me that Iago or Griffin or somebody's got a round-nosed fish. I'm hassling Britt Merrick, and I'm like, I don't think we can release something as powerful as, the MTFA on the CT, but maybe like a solution or, something, and they were down there. They're in the mix. I think there was actually some hidden volume in some of the shapes we saw, but man, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it in future for back at Raglan. As you pointed out, like, any size at Raglan, especially low tide when you have those longer walls. Like, I love seeing the speed and the different lines. So yeah, I'm going to go with the lineups, the big third winner coming out of New Zealand, thanks to Felipe and thanks to Marcio Zuvi. And I hope we go back because I want to see more CT surfers on something slightly different than what they normally ride.
It's so funny because you and I text pretty much every day, whether there's an event on or not, but we were talking about that so much. And then as soon as that happened, I remember asking you, is Iago going to be on the round nose fish? Is it going to happen
I'm like,
finally?
let me ask.
I see so many clips of him on those boards. And his coach, Leandro da Silva, rips on that thing too. He usually travels with that board in his quiver. And I'm like, they're kind of the same size and stature. Maybe he rides his in his heat. Who knows? And it didn't end up working out, but I think there's potential and room down the line to grow in that aspect, and hopefully more surfers catch on. Always have a fish in your quiver. Always have alternative craft in your quiver. You never know when you're going to need it.
You never know, even if it's just us getting to watch the free surfing clips. But you're totally right. When it popped up on the screen, I was doing the Leo DiCaprio Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme where I'm like pointing at the screen, and I'm like, I recognize. This is great.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun. That was good winners and losers. We'll take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to keep talking about surfboards. So don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Mitch Salazar. Mitch, it is time to talk about surfboards. The Surfboard Empire CT Shaper Rankings presented by Vea. It's been a banger so far this season. We had the first event of the year, Bells Beach, which saw 3-time CT Shaper of the Year lost surfboards. They maintained pole position after CT1. CT2, following both men's and women's wins in George Pitar and Lakey Peterson. Santa Barbara's Channel Islands took the lead coming out of WA. We had another double win at stop number 3 with Snapper Rocks, and this time it was by Darren Hanley, DHD, where the Gold Coast outfit grabbed number 1 spot on the rankings, thanks to Steph Gilmore and Ethan Ewing. And with the completion of New Zealand, a little bit of full circle, we're back with Lost Surfboards in the lead after posting both women's finalists, runner-up Sawyer Lindblad and event winner Carissa Moore. Mitch, what has stood out to you so far this season as far as equipment goes, and what stood out to you specifically in New Zealand?
I think the main thing that I really saw over here at Manu Bay was the CI riders on the Mikey February shortboard. The solution has kind of been tapped as a new big thing that's all around. But for the most part, CI Pro, CI 2.0 Pro, the better every day had kind of been, what a lot of the surfers had gone to when it came to competing. And I feel like the vast majority of them were on the Mikey February shorty, and they look great. Not that, a lot of them got great results, but I thought the surfing looked good, and I definitely think it's one of the options that they have out there. I want to give props to Italo for doing so well too and switching boards in the final. It seemed like there was an equipment malfunction halfway through a wave and came in real quick, was on an all-in, which is basically a more modern version of his IF-15, switched out to the synthetic 84, and as Joe said, synthetic used to be the name of Timmy's original brand, and the 84, it was more of an 80s model, but that's just really a good all-around board that's going to give you a lot of speed down the line. At that point, he already had his 2 scores. In the bank, though.
Well, on that real quick,
side,
real quick on that too. I just want to call out, Simon Jones, who is Timmy Patterson's man on the ground there in New Zealand, and I think Richie Levitt called him out in the broadcast too. He was sort of instrumental in helping Italo and on the Patterson side there. So awesome to see kind of local support crew, in the pit when their team rider wins.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's why I think having the labels in different parts of the world is so important. That's why I think JS has done so much better in other regions worldwide, because since Miguel and the Pupo family got the label down there in Brazil, they've been able to expand the market, produce obviously better quality equipment within the country too. And you have the factory right there with Wagner, their dad, at OHP, Ohana Pupo Surfboards, now just making the JS surfboards themselves. The majority of the part, I feel like the Monster and the Golden Child are still kind of the standards for Jason Stevenson and his team. On the Mayhem side, I feel like the F1 has been used quite a bit lately. I know Cole Hauschman loves that board. That's the board that Yagodora was able to win the finals at last year in Fiji. Seems like a good majority of the surfers on Mayhems, though, still in the driver 3. I know Gabby Bryant loves that board. Sakura, the same thing. And when it came to the Sharp Eyes, I mean, you had a mix of everything, but really the one that stands out the most is Felipe on the Modern 2+1. So all in all, I feel like most people are still on traditional shortboards, something with a good amount of rocker that'll fit in the pocket real quick. This wasn't an easy wave, though, and especially when it was smaller, I was still really surprised that there were a lot of people that weren't riding something with just a bit more volume up towards the chest, at least for paddling, or something further up the nose just to get into the wave easier. Because, if there's a broad tail, you're going to be able to pivot that thing easily, especially with the right fin setup.
Yeah. I kind of, my civilian brain clocked this, but I want to hear from your expert perspective. Obviously, we were struggling for swell a bit, but even on the days when we had swell, it looked like a pretty different wave when it was like medium to high tide versus that low tide. I think, Felipe on that Modern 2+1 really stood out when it was low tide. And then, I was kind of hoping that was going to start a revolution. We were going to see everyone kind of shift towards that kind of equipment in all conditions. But, when we saw, I think the next few rounds run, even inside of that media higher tide, it looked like, yes, that alternative shape still could perform very well there, but it felt like you could make more of an argument to get on your standard equipment. What would you chalk that up to, Mitch? Or am I even reading that right?
Yeah, no, I think you are right. For the most part, I just think a lot of the regular footers especially had the advantage of just getting to the lip quicker, and I think for the most part that's why they all stayed on their traditional shortboard, just because they were already on it, first of all.
Right.
But if they knew that there was a lip to hit, it was at the beginning of the wave. The back end of the wave, you either got that double up on the inside, but at that point, work had to be done already. The only person that I can see that can really make a huge difference out of that was probably Italo. He did it, maybe 10, 12 times on finals day.
Right.
But no, for the most part, those fat sections on the outside were much harder for goofy footers, because unless you're really fading and you're taking advantage of the white water at the beginning, you're really having to carve. And too many carves doesn't impress the judges. It's on rail, yes, but unless it's something super different, you're never really going to get an excellent score. And I think that's where Yago had a major point of difference. He was bringing variation with his carves, added in a great layback, and of course he has the airs too. You can even look at Gabe's waves on the Cabiancas, always trying to fit in as much as he could. But if you notice on the small days, especially against Felipe, the first reverse that he pulls is on the face of the wave. He doesn't even bring the tail out or anything because he knows that he has to go more into a slide because it's a fatter wave, right? Whereas Felipe, he's just rifling those things off on the back end because he's already in the pocket with that fade that he has from takeoff. So goofy footers, you want something with a bit more volume. I feel like the regular footers could get away with the short board a bit more.
That's interesting. You mentioned Gabe, you mentioned Channel Islands, after their really killer start to the season, unfortunately for them, New Zealand was the first event of the year where they didn't put up a single result in either the men's or the women's quarterfinals. It's something that we continue to notice, though, with Gabe is he continues to ride the CIs in training sessions and warm-up sessions, but hasn't yet pulled the trigger during a heat. He goes back to the Cabiancas. Obviously, the system, that he's developed is working for it, but I wonder, if we're going to see that change throughout the season. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because it's interesting that you would use the training sessions and the warm-ups as an opportunity to not further dial in your equipment that you're competing on.
It is. And if there's one person that can make anything look good,
sure.
It's probably that dude. I mean, how many different boards has he probably tried since January 1st until right now, May the 25th?
Yep.
I'd probably have to say at least, 40 to 60 boards if we're even, below generous. This is just a guy that to me has redefined the sport. He changed the game, globalized everything worldwide, and if there's one person that I feel confident that he knows what he wants under his feet, it's definitely Medina. And I think he looks great on every board that he's ridden. I think particularly on the JSs, there were a couple moments on the Goldie where I was like, whoa, if you stay on these,
right,
they might have a world champ at the end of the year. But I just think he has so much trust in Johnny and his team and those boards that he's ridden for a decade and a half now. I see him staying on those boards for the majority of the year, and I think Britt and Brent Power are doing such an amazing job at CI, giving him boards to try. I just don't know when he's actually going to pull the trigger to actually use it during a heat.
It's a good question, and I think because surfing, especially championship tour surfing, is probably the most passionately viewed, subjectively scored sport on the planet. There's a little bit of the medieval, that's my opinion. And there's a bit of the medieval times phenomenon where it's I got sat in the Green Knight section. It's go Green Knight, and so we see a little bit what we want to see. I see him on the Channel Islands. I'm he should ride the hexes, and then people on the Gold Coast who ride JSs are he should be on the tractors, and it's everyone sort of manifesting what they want to see. But you're right. If anyone's got a firm grasp on what they want to be riding, it's Gabby. You mentioned Lost, and I think we should state tied for the best performance we've seen from a single brand in terms of quantity since we started measuring it. They had 8 surfers out of the 16 quarterfinalists, which is heavy,
Damn.
50%.
8?
It's only happened once since we've been measuring this the last 4 years, and it was Lost last year at Lower Trestles. So, big shout out to Matt Biolis, who was on the ground, and obviously their team manager, Gian Bernini. We are measuring things differently this year, of course. We've adjusted it from all the quarterfinalist results are going into the rankings to just taking the top 2 results, regardless of how many they have. But, having a high-performing team like that obviously helps, right? It stacks the deck in your favor in terms of getting those really, really strong results. But yeah, such an impressive showing from them, in the land of the long white cloud down there.
Well, look, you sent me the Surfboard Empire CT Shaper rankings presented by Vea last night when the event finished. They're leading by more than 9,000 points right now. 57,260 at first is lost. DHD trailing them at second, 48,120. I mean, more than 9,000 points now. What a switch around, right? And
since we're only counting the top 2 results too, it's not all 8 of those. It's they got 8 results, they're going to be way up there. But it's no, it's the strength of just their top 2 from New Zealand, which is really impressive that they've pulled that far ahead in one event.
And I think Matt being on the ground too is so essential for a lot of these surfers, giving him feedback in the moment. Hey, this wave's a little bit more difficult. It has shades of lowers. It goes fat real quick. All of a sudden it stands up. What is something that we could potentially work on or just smooth out some kinks and develop a board that'll work better for this wave and maybe other waves on the CT in the future? So there's many things. And I think that's why the presence of the shapers matters a lot for these surfers, because they're the ones that are actually feeling things under their feet. It's like anything else in the world. I mean, and especially with analytics, you know how much I love my stats, but in baseball, any other kind of sport, you can do all the talking, you can do all the reading you want about stats, but there is a different kind of feeling once you're up there doing it yourself and you get that sensation back to you. And I feel like especially a shaper that rips like those guys, they know what they want to hear from their surfers and vice versa. That communication has to be very clear between them too.
Yeah, great in the booth too. Matt was awesome in the booth, kind of breaking down the different models for his team riders there. So yeah, interesting stuff. I really hope we go back to New Zealand in 2027, and I really hope we get good swell. And I'd love to see a little bit of variety from the CT surfers, even in the free surf. So I love seeing those different lines. But I thought it was a really interesting wave. And I think that last day really showcased like even sort of the tip of the iceberg of like quality potential and like what you're going to see from a surfing standpoint. Mitch, before we break out of the Surfboard Empire CT Shaper rankings presented by Vea segment, I want to know, man, what have you been riding lately? And then related question, you and I are both going to be on the ground with producer Miguel in El Salvador next week for the Surf City El Salvador Pro. Forecast looks okay, knock on wood so far. Looks like there's some swell in the water.
Yeah.
What have you been riding lately? What are you bringing down there? And is there going to be a big difference in terms of what the CT are riding there compared to New Zealand?
Ooh. That's actually a hard question to answer because there's not it's a pretty quick turnaround from there to Brazil. So I feel like you already kind of have to have your boards dialed for both events at this location. And when Saquarema gets good, I mean, you're riding something really similar to what you'd be riding in Central America. To answer the first part of the question, though, today I rode Driver 3.0, John Tech Flex Futures. Love that board, that setup. It's a swell that's picking up, so I wanted something just a bit more stable, a little bit more rocker. Surf right here in Huntington Beach, really fun with about other 300 people in the water too, which is pretty typical for a holiday in Southern California. But outside of that, Stub Driver, also a great model by Mayhem. I love that board. It's a really good all-around board. OG Puddle Jumper on the smaller days. And I have a mid-length that I got from Forecast, this new brand that they're making the majority of their boards out of Sardinia in Italy. My boy Tony Curto hooked me up with a mid-length called the Wombat. It's perfect. I have it as a 2+1 setup with a big single and the 2 side bites. So on the smaller days when I need something to paddle, that's really been getting me out there in the water. So short boards, mid-lengths, little bit of everything out there. But what about you? Before I get into the second part of the question, I want to know what you've been riding. It's been a while since we ripped together.
It's been tough. I feel like that was kind of the last little gasp of okay waves. It's been tough up here. I've been sticking to my trusty better everyday quad EPS and just riding the F6 Legacy quad fins from Futures. Brought to Australia, it was just like a Swiss Army knife. I could ride it kind of in a lot of different waves. And yeah, I don't know. Like I used to travel around the tour and I'm like, you delusional dream in your head of like, I need 4 boards to surf in and around my actual job. And
you end up riding the same one.
Man, I ended up throwing my back out, just carry the bag around. But like, I think now I'm just like, I just need to minimize my decision. So I'm probably just going to take the one and see how it goes. So, but yeah, it's such a good board and I'm fortunate that I have it. So.
Yeah, to answer your question, though, I would say majority of the boards are probably 80 to 90% similar to what they'd be riding. Especially somebody, let me give you an example, George Pitar, riding the Mikey February shortboard lately. To me, that's an excellent board for the point over there in El Salvador. I think that board, I like the IF15, the All-In Now by Timmy Patterson, I think is going to be great. I think the F1 and the Driver are 2 perfect boards for the point when it's pumping. Sharp Eye, there's a couple of different models. I feel like, any kind of board that Felipe rides is pretty much the board to ride out there, especially with the same fin setup too. What I like to do at a location like this, especially with the big coefficient in tides that we usually have in this part of the Pacific, is bring multiple fin setups and try them out different tides too. I'm pretty particular with the fins that I normally like to ride when it's punchy. Usually John Tech Flex. I had the Freestones for a while. Jack Robinson's work really well. If I'm riding FCS2s, I'm typically on Mick Fanning's fins. But anything in the Carver kind of family for FCS is something that I really like. But think outside of the box. Think, what is this wave going to look like on a high tide? And will these fins perform? Will the board feel exactly the same as I want it to? Will I be getting enough drive? Will I be able to push just as hard? And I think Gabby Bryan could be a perfect example of that. Will she be riding the same kind of equipment once it's chunkier, higher tide, even if it is big and has the good amount of push, or on a low tide where it stands up a bit more and it is really shallow out there by where Mama Roca is. So gotta watch out for that, especially heading straight towards Brazil afterwards. I bring a pair of different boards, but for the majority, I feel like they're going to ride the same boards that they were riding over at Raglan.
Good insight. Well, thanks to Surfboard Empire and thanks to Vea for supporting the CT Shaper rankings. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to talk fantasy and answer listener questions. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Lineup Pod. I'm your part-time co-host, Mitchell Salazar, here with the great Dave Prodan. Let's get into fantasy and our Instagram fan questions. Remember, if we don't get to your questions on today's episode, always write us at the Lineup Pod on our social media sites. All right, Dave, talking about fantasy, New Zealand. How did your team look? How did you do? No cheating, because I want to know. We got a competitive league. Kaipo says that he's dominating out there out of all of our colleagues, but I feel like us two goofy footers up here, we might have had a decent event going into our first performance left of 2026 on the Championship Tour.
I wish I could say that was true for me, but I don't think I did that well. But yeah, fantasy is funny, right? Because I spend like so much time thinking about it before the event starts, and I'm like, yes. And I do both. Like I do the bracket. Well, I set my team, and then I do the bracket, and then I cross-reference my bracket with my team, and I make adjustments. And yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, I vaguely remember who's on my team, and then the event starts happening, and then as soon as my first person goes down, I'm like, oh man. And then I don't think about it till after the event. So sometimes I do better than I thought. But, in New Zealand, my team had on the men's side, Gabriel Medina, Iago Dora, Connor O'Leary, Felipe Toledo, Billy Stearman, and Oscar Berry. Tough times.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, tough times for my low seeds. They didn't get out of there. My power surfer was Gabby. He went down earlier than I would have preferred. And then on the women's side, I had Katie Simmers, Gabriella Bryan, Betty Luce Johnson, Carissa Moore, Brisa Hennessy, and Francisca Veselko. Again, tough times for my lower tier surfers in Brisa and Francisca. Carissa was my power surfer, though, so I think any value that I had out of New Zealand came on the back of the wonderful Mrs. Moore there. But yeah, if I had to look at where I ended up, okay, let's have a look here. My fantasy team in New Zealand finished 17,948th overall, which is not great. Season long, I'm 5,819th. I guess that's better. We do have our lineup podcast league. I finished 339th in the event. Season long, I'm sitting at 140th. I do want to call out for the lineup podcast league. The winner of our New Zealand event was the Lizard Surfs team, who is also the overall winner. Leader, I should say, in our lineup podcast league, and is also third overall. The third highest in the world is in our league. So a little lineup royalty there. But yeah, that's how it went for me, fantasy wise, in New Zealand. What about you, Mitch? How'd you do?
Lizard, damn, that guy's shredding so far in 26. My team, it wasn't bad. I'm satisfied. I'm happy. Same thing as you. I did have Gabe as my power surfer. I had Iago as my second surfer in tier A, and I was about to put him as my power surfer, and I feel like I kind of blew it. We all went down the same path. We saw social media. We saw the free surfing clips. There were waves. Gabe was on a tear. And you look at his 3 rounds that he surfed. Lowest heat total was 13.9, so it was still shredding. Iago dropped the perfect 10 in the quarters, though. He lost out in the semis. I had a Griffin, Kanoa rounding out Tier B. Griffin made it to the semis. Kanoa made it to the round of 16. And then I had Eli Hanneman. He lost out to Gabe, unfortunately, so friendly fire. But then I had Morgan Siblick. So I bounced back with that.
Call.
I had a finalist right there, so really stoked on that. And we were chatting before the event, by the way, because the draw was already out. And it was Bill and Morgan. And they're like, oh, man, that's a tough heat. And I told you, I just feel like Morgan has got something going for him right now. He's needing a result, and he hasn't surfed bad in the first few events. Women's side, power surfer, lost out early. I still have trust in Caitlin Simmers, but she did not do very well. Same thing for Molly Picklum. So quarterfinal is okay. Do want to see her make a final, though. Carissa, I have the women's champion, so stoked on that. I had Aaron Brooks, did not do well. 10.5 heat total, losing out in round 2. Kika Veselko losing out round 1. And then Tia Zabrowski finally makes a heat this season, so good on her. Overall, I'm not going to give you my global event ranking because it's not very high, but I'll give you my ranking post-event.
Okay.
Just on the global ranking.
That's what you got.
4,908. I have 2,268.4 total fantasy points. So inside top 5,000 worldwide. I'm pretty satisfied with the first 4 events so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, neither of us. Well, I would say that like over the tens of thousands of teams out there, like you and I are probably in the same quartile percentage-wise. We both of us have a lot of work to do to catch up to Lizard Surfs at 3. That's one thing to think of. When you're going through your team though, you mentioned, Katie and Molly didn't perform, as well as you want to. One thing that probably is worth mentioning is that the last 2 events on the women's side, Steph Gilmore, 8-time women's world champion, wins at Snapper. Carissa Moore, 5-time women's world champion, wins in New Zealand. Both of them returning after sabbaticals from the sport. So there are so many world champions on the women's tour right now, but the veteran world champions and sort of the queens of the sport with the biggest dynasties in terms of world titles really flexing over the last couple of events.
And you know what's so funny about that too is that a lot of these Groms, a lot of the younger kids have been calling them out and saying, "Hey, I want a shot at her. I need to make my mark on tour, and the only way by doing that is by beating the people that have already been here and succeeded for a number of years." And I think so far the veterans have definitely proved that they got the experience and winning those close heats. And I think a perfect example is the final between Sawyer and Carissa. Sawyer had her on the ropes. Carissa started off early, but guess what? Carissa came back in a massive way with that 9-point ride and saved the very best for last. And it just goes to show that, wounded animal, sometimes they're even more lethal when they're like that. And I feel like Carissa demonstrated that in the final. And props to her. But as you said, I think Steph looked great at the point break over there at home at Snapper too. And another point break heading into El Salvador, I think it could be a good shot for both of them.
Yeah, and I will add on Steph too. Like, I think, she probably contributes to this reputation a little bit just because her forehand is so strong and she's such a beautiful, point break surfer out at Snapper Rocks. But, I think people were undervaluing her backhand and, 2007, 2008, the Movie Star Classic in Moncora, Peru, a very, very similar left-hand point break to Manu Bay at Raglan. And, Steph's a 2-time winner out there. Her backhand's pretty legit and didn't get the result she wanted, but I kind of think people were sleeping on that a little bit. It's not I'll put it this way, it's not as big a liability as I think people think it is. And we'll see it out at Fiji and Tahiti this year as well.
That's a good way to put it. Not as big as a liability. And she doesn't have 8 world titles just for anything, she's had to win on both sides of the coin. And I think there was a heat against Macy Callahan. It was either 18 or 19 in France. She needs almost a 10.
Right.
And she drops a high 9. Yeah. And Steph doesn't make the heat. But at that point, I remember calling it. And I was like, wow, I hadn't seen you surf a left like this in a long time. So when you do need it, you can't go to it. It's just, we don't see it every day because her forehand is just that beautiful, Well, and I think it's an option.
Yeah, and I think we'll keep an eye on this sort of generational tension between the title contenders on the women's side, and obviously the surfers that don't have a world title, their names are all threats as well. But appreciate everyone that's joined the Lineup Podcast Mega League. We do have prizes for the winners again at the end of the year, and we'll stay in touch. But I think we also got some questions from the listeners. Mitch, what do we got?
Oh, we do. And once again, if we don't get to your question in today's episode, you can always write in at the Lineup Pod. Well, we're going to do our very best to respond, but more than anything, we want to answer these loaded questions. We got a great one to start things off in this listener segment, Dave. At Sandspit, Brazilian Storm, are they hungrier than the rest to be displaying such dominance? Starting off strong, Dave.
Yeah, great question. I actually think it's a topic that you and I discuss and we've been talking about for years, probably even before we started podcasting. But yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it even earlier in this episode where might be the most dominant so far, the most potent part of the Brazilian storm in 2026, just in what we're seeing right now. And, it is a long time coming, right? I think if you think about the information age sort of democratizes information with the internet and social media, and pre-internet, you didn't have access to all this information, and post-internet, you've got access to, this is the best kind of surfing, these are the best kind of techniques, this is the best way to train, these are the best surfboards, this is how you shape. And when I say it democratizes things, it's like everyone's got access to it. You're not just relying on, what you can find out, in your town or in your state or in your country, or waiting for the tour to come by once or twice a year and getting a glimpse of what, surfers from around the world look like. And when everything is leveled out that way, you start looking for, well, what are the actual differences? And I think motivation in 2026, and I think it has been this case for years at this point, is the biggest point of difference on tour. I think you do have surfers that are coming from, in a lot of ways, like a lower socioeconomic part of the spectrum. And yeah, if everything else is equal, if fitness is equal and technique is equal and boards and equipment is equal, then yeah, the hungrier surfers are going to have an advantage. So I think it's a great question. I really do think it is like one of the biggest stories of our time in professional surfing and probably in sports around the world. I think you see it in other sports like baseball as well. But yeah, I know, Mitch, what do you think about this question?
I think to the only other comparison that we have in the history of the championship tour, there's probably two, actually. The busting down the door era, with the Australians rising up, Sean Thompson also part of the group, the lone South African, but Mark Richards kind of going under the radar as the real quiet, chill kind of guy, but that was ultra competitive and really good at winning. He won 4 world championships. Then you fast forward to the momentum generation, a generation that changed things. You got Kelly out of that, Rob Machado, Shane, Ross, Greg Browning, may rest in peace, a good friend of ours, and all those great guys that made a huge impact and especially revolutionized the industry more than anything. They were able to make a really good paycheck out of things back in the 90s, heading into 2000s. And then I think probably the most important generation, I'd say, but some people might not agree with me, and that's totally fine. But I think the Brazilian storm redefined things. And as you said, it's a very big country, widely populated, and of course when we talk about a huge coastline too, it was just a matter of time before they had a world champion. And I think Gabe changed things not only for them but for the rest of the world. And as you said, socioeconomics is one thing. I also think the desire to succeed because of how competitive the country is by itself too. If you look at the majority of their sports, soccer, beach volleyball, mixed martial arts, judo, jiu-jitsu, a lot of those different kind of art forms that they have over there in Brazil, it translated into surfing too. And iron sharpens iron, as we all know, and I think all it took was one and motivated others. Felipe has 2 now. Italo could potentially get his second one this year too. And I still think that Iago's, is world champ material for later on this year too. He's still my pick for 2026. But the way Gabe's surfing, man, I mean, those top 4 guys right now, including Miguel Pupo, he's already won an event. So I think overall, it just comes down to the motivation and who wants it more.
Yeah.
Are you going to push me to the brink of not wanting anything else in my life rather than a world title? And I feel like that's where they're at right now, Dave.
It's such a good one. And it's interesting because they're all almost like equally hungry in Brazil, but have different like stories behind that hunger, right? Like Gabe's story is not Iago's story, is not Felipe's story, is not Miguel's story. Like it's really interesting. But yeah, great question from Met Sanspet.
100%.
The second question, I'm gonna jump in here because this one's actually directed at you, Mitch, and this is from at Jimmy with 3 M's _White, who asks, did Italo get overscored, Mitch? So what do you think about the scoring situation with Italo in New Zealand there?
Yeah, this is my boy, Jaime Blanco, Jimmy White from our club here in Newport Beach Board Riders. He's been ripping all season and actually went through an injury a few years ago, so nice to see him back in a rhythm. He's doing the regional QS too. And Jimmy, to answer your question, objectively, I do not think that he got overscored. Richie actually pointed out in the final that if he keeps on doing the same maneuver over and over again, he was referencing the air reverse, judges wouldn't appreciate it as much anymore. As soon as that happened, though, Richie had to take back his words and say, okay, the way he did it on this wave was so vastly different to the other one that it brought a different perspective to the judges. He drops the 8 and then eventually gets the 9. And if you look at the 9, I mean, the first air is incredible, but the second one is a completely different rotation. And the risk on the 8 that he had was absurd. I mean, the landing itself, and I know that Morgan was ripping all event long, but the direction that surfing has headed the last 10 to 15 years and where it's at right now, you got to reward high-risk maneuvers, especially in the air. There's so much difficulty in that, and you're putting your whole body at risk. So I felt like he was adequately rewarded, and I feel like the better man won in the final right there at Raglan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like when we were talking about our fantasy teams, like if you had a time machine and you traveled back in time and you're like, spoiler alert, Italo won at Raglan, you'd be like, obviously. Like such an event favorite. And like, I think one of the beautiful things about surfing is there's different ways to surf, you know, with excellence. There's different ways to score with excellence. Even if you're both on your forehand or you're both on your backhand, everyone's got different weapons. And, you know, when we think of Italo, he's a world champion. He's got so many tools, so many arrows in his quiver. He's fast, he's technical, he's got power. And I think at a wave that is like a mechanical left-hander, like Raglan, like he's able to dive deep into these particular strengths at different moments. And I really think that's what we saw. And I think he was scored very appropriately for the way he served. He's a well-deserving winner.
And out of this generation, I mean, you probably see it more often than not, having covered this for 20 years now. He's easily one of the most complete surfers on the planet, right? And he's gotten well everywhere. But if you look at his results at the Surf Ranch, Dave, they've translated the wave like this, and that's why he's done so well in both at the Surf Ranch and at Abu Dhabi, which resembles a little bit the left right here at Manu Bay.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think what you're seeing on the CT in modern times is as I said, every surfer has like a few arrows that are extra strong. But they're good everywhere, right? Like in the past, a surfer like Italo maybe would have been pigeonholed as just an air guy, but like Italo's won at Bell's Beach. He's a standout in Tahiti. Like he can win everywhere, you know, and it's like, and you could almost go down the rankings, and especially when you're at the pointy end of the rankings in the top 10 and you're looking at surfers and saying like the top 10 surfers could win everywhere. But there are certain venues and certain conditions where I'm focusing in on that particular part of their strengths because they have the ability to take that to like a standard kind of like A to an A plus, where maybe other surfers can't, you know, but they're stronger in other spaces. So yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. Italo's going to be on my team next year if we go back to Raglan.
That's a good pick. I'm going to name four finals off real quick, by the way. Italo beating Mick Fanning at Bell's for his first event win. He beat John over in Tahiti when it was pumping too. He beat Gabe in the final at Pipe to the side of the world title where Gabe had already won, by the way. And he beat Morgan Siblick, a standout surfer on his backhand, over at Raglan. So just 4 names right there in those finals, specialists in those types of waves too. So Italo's the real deal. Our final question, by the way, once again, thank you so much for tuning in to the lineup. Our colleague at Chris Cote sending in a question, and it's a great one too, Dave, a proposition for you. Should there be a prize at the end of the year for Air of the Season? If so, is Yago in the lead with a 540 at Raglan?
Mr. Cote, Monday Mass Podcast, like Trans World Surf, editor-in-chief for the real heads that know, legit surfer skater. Like Chris Cote is awesome. This is an interesting question. Like we used to have the ASP and the WSL awards, and you know there were years where we'd have like a maneuver or a wave of the year award, and there were eras where this was like one huge sensational air, and then there were eras where, you know, and this in some years this is sort of surfer voted, but like the maneuver of the year, quote unquote, would shift back to like just a power turn. Not just, but like a power turn. And I think you see that pendulum swing between like foundational classic surfing, high performance surfing to be sure, and then progressive technical surfing. And it's, I think that tension is what drives a lot of the sport's progress in a way. Like it swings in one direction and then someone pushes it in the different direction and it swings back. And you look at surfers these days and you just see them have this amazing balance of both. And yeah, I think it would be cool. Like air of the season, I wouldn't go past Cote's call if he thinks Iago's 540 at Raglan's in the front runner spot. I mean, I wouldn't challenge the expert on this, but yeah, I think it's cool, like to kind of have that progress. I almost think it shouldn't be like a WSL thing, or if it is, it should almost be like a sponsorship led thing where it's like,
I like that.
Like so-and-so is putting up the money for this particular kind of surfing, right? And you can have like tube of the year or whatever. One other thing I'd bring up, I was recently having coffee with Sam McIntosh at Stab, and we were talking about like kind of the trajectory of high performance surfing. And when I started in the mid 2000s, at least started, touring and working for the ASP, it was a real wild thing to see someone like stick air reverses like in heats. It wasn't the first time people were doing them, but people were doing them kind of like intentionally and doing them with purpose and scoring very, very high. A few years of that later, like the pendulum swung back to where it's like airs weren't getting underscored necessarily, but like it had moved back to more power-based surfing. And then it swung back with kind of the rise of the Brazilian storm. It wasn't just air reverses, but like really big, like hugely technical, like Dane and Jordy were a part of this as well, like exciting surfing. And yeah, it's interesting. Like I just think it moves in phases where someone will push it in one direction. That'll kind of be what a lot of the CT surfers are gravitating towards. And then someone will push it in the other direction. But, back to Chris's question, Mitch, what do you think? Should there be a prize for air of the season?
I like it. If it's not an air, just maneuver the season, I feel like for the majority of it, unless it's just an unbelievable barrel, like 1 in a million kind of type thing or something like that, or a major power hack. I think one of Carissa's nines definitely is up there too. She has one turn on one of those waves that is just otherworldly. But yeah, I definitely think this would be the front runner for air or maneuver of the year so far. Iago's 540 over at Manu Bay. And great question, Chris. Looking forward to working with you as always over in El Salvador once again. Before we end today, I just want to go over something real quick. Just give us a little brink into what to expect fantasy teams for El Salvador, because I have a couple dark horses that I'm going to name for you, okay? Eli Hanneman, men's side. He's never surfed here before as a CT surfer. I like his odds. I love Luke Thompson's style for this wave too. And I think Jordy Smith has to be named out as well, last year's defending champion. Women's side, Kika Veselko. I love her style at this wave. Come on, Tia. Let's go. Get something going over here. We need to see something out of you. And, of course, I already named her, but I think Alyssa Spencer's also going to have a great event on the back end.
Great picks. I mean, Jordy's such an interesting one. Certainly the elder statesman on tour. Absolutely was at the vanguard of high performance surfing for years and years and years, a perennial kind of world title threat. Had one of his best seasons ever last year. He's currently ranked 26th, right? So yeah, I mean, he's not only should be considered a performance-based event favorite at a wave that he's won at, but sort of a motivational favorite, I think, at this point too. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And it'll be interesting with this format as well, right? Where it is one and done. It's elimination from your very first heat, regardless of where you sit in the rankings. So it'll be interesting to see who he draws and how he performs out there. But with a lot of swell on the way, I think certainly from a fantasy perspective, he'd be value for money at this point. And I mean, you're looking at the rankings too, like Zhao Xianca, 27th. Like he's in need of a result. Great forehand surfer. Al Cleland, like, hasn't had a heat win yet this season. Yeah. Like, he's another one that it's like, Al should be in the mix. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to El Salvador for sure. I'm looking forward to being down there. And, yeah, I mean, let's do it. We should do we should do a Monday Mass / lineup pod crossover event. Like a big crossover event like you see in the comic books and down in El Salvador. So Miguel's going to be there. We'll all get on there. We'll do something. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, working overtime.
That's right, yeah. Over some cervezas. Mitch, good talking to you on the podcast. I know we talk every day, but I enjoy talking to you on the podcast. Thanks to everyone that wrote in at the Lineup Pod on Instagram. Congrats to New Zealand. Congrats to our winners. And quick turnaround. Get your fantasy teams in because El Salvador is around the corner.